Good morning, afternoon, or evening. How y'all doing today? Welcome back to Morrow's Math Corner. Today we're going to learn about general factoring strategies. Or in other words, we're going to wrap up all of the factoring skills that we've learned and recognize when and how to use them. So let's get right to it. Let's go over these factoring strategies. Number one, first thing you always want to remember is to factor out the GCF if possible. Always take a quick scan of the polynomial that you have. If you can recognize a GCF, go ahead and factor it out. Next, number two, if you have one of the following situations, follow the specific rules for each situation. If you have two terms, you're going to be either dealing with a difference or a sum of squares or a difference or sum of cubes. If you have three terms, you're going to be factoring the trinomial into two different binomials. And if you have four terms, you're going to factor by grouping. And there you have it. So let's get right to it. Number one, first thing first, always look for a GCF. And in this particular case, I can absolutely factor out a 3 from every term. So I'm going to factor out my GCF of 3, leaving me with a leftover of x squared minus 6x minus 16. Then I have a trinomial here, so I'm going to factor it into two binomials, my x and my x. And then I'm going to ask the question, what times what is negative 16, but when added together is negative 6? And my answer will be negative 8 and positive 2, because when negative 8 is multiplied to 2, you get 16, and negative 8 plus 2 is negative 6. Perfect. Okay, next. I've got a perfect square here. That's my first term. Minus another perfect square here. That's my second term. They're being subtracted, so I have a difference of squares. So it's the square root of the first term plus the square root of the second term times the square root of the first term minus the square root of the second term, which is 3y squared. And there you have it. Bingo. Next, always look for a GCF, and in this particular case, you do have a GCF of 2. So I'm going to factor out that GCF of 2, leaving me with the leftover of x squared minus 1. And my first term here is a perfect square. My second term here is a perfect square. So I can factor that as the difference of squares. So my answer is going to be 2 times the square root of the first term plus square root of the second term times square root of the first term minus square root of the second term. And there we have it. Perfection. Okay. Next, number 3 rather. Sorry. All right, let's look at all of these. I think we could take a 2 out of here. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to factor out a 2 first, leaving us with 2x cubed minus 3x squared minus 18x plus 27. I've got 4 terms, so I'm going to use the grouping method. So please remember to keep that GCF and create a giant parentheses and then start factoring by grouping. Okay, that would be my suggestion. So I'm going to factor out of here an x squared, and my leftovers are going to be a 2x minus 3. For my second binomial, I'm going to factor out a negative 9, with my leftovers being another 2x minus 3. Now that I have two identical binomials, I can factor that out, hence factor by grouping. So I factor out the 2x minus 3, leaving me with the leftover of x squared minus 9. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but this x squared minus 9 is is a difference of squares. Sorry, it's a difference of squares. So I'm going to go ahead and factor that out as well. So my final factorization would be the 2 times the 2x minus 3 And then my difference of squares, square root of the first term plus square root of the second term times square root of the first term minus square root of the second term. And there we have it. That's my final answer, fully factored. Always be cognizant of those little tricks. All right, number 4. All right, what do we got here? This is divisible by both 2 and by 3. So if a number is divisible by both 2 and 3, we can divide them by 6. And there's also an x in each of these terms, so I can factor out a GCF of 6x here. So I'm going to factor out my 6x. My leftovers are going to be 4y squared minus 12y plus 9. Aha, and now I personally recognize that I've got a perfect square in the front as the first term and a perfect square as the second term. Let's see if this is a perfect square trinomial. Okay, let's see if the middle works out. So we've got my 6x times square root of 4y squared is 2y. Square root of 9 is 3. 2 times 2y times 3 is 12y. There's a negative, so we'll put a negative there and square it, and there you have it. Boom. That's a good one. All right. And last but not least, I've got a binomial here. I don't have any GCFs, but I do have a perfect cube minus a perfect cube. That's my first term. That's my second term. They're both perfect cubes. So I'm going to go ahead and use the difference of cube formula. So it's going to be the cube root of the first term minus the cube root of the second term times schisms. First term squared, change sign, multiply, and then second term squared. And there you have it. You're done. So those are the general strategies of factoring. Hope you learned a lot. Come back anytime. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye now.